Show Ryan Pinnick, who is the founder of Supergenius, and he empowers people to live their genius. So Ryan, welcome. How you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm really honored to get on your show. I know we've been trying to do something for a while and we're both out there trying to make a difference. So I'm glad we've got this space. Thank you very much.
That's my absolute pleasure. So for people that don't know too much about you, Supergenius and creating your supergenius, living your supergenius, what is that?
Yeah, so I got into personal development for lots of reasons: financially, spiritually, emotionally, all sorts of things. A colorful past, both my fault and you know, an interesting family, and I always had a ambition to live a good life, really. And when I kind of went down the road of personal development, I was like, wow, you can really actually create an amazing life. And so I did all the usual stuff, DeMartini, Tony Robbins, Bob Proctor, you know, learned all tremendous things. And I kind of felt like something else was out there, not better or worse. I think everyone's can learn from everyone else. I think everyone's got a place in the world. And then I came across super consciousness, and specifically how you can actually unleash your subconscious mind to create what you want using intuition and imagination. And that was about 11 years ago. And at that time I was in real estate, investing in the US, and I actually did very, very well by combining what I've learned in super consciousness to usual tactics. And I found that my intuition was innovating new strategies. I was kind of inventing things as opposed to copying how other people are doing. And I think you're familiar with the term that if you want to be successful, you've got to model other people. But then I thought, like, why not be the person that other people model, the actual genius, if that makes sense? And I started applying this mostly in entrepreneurship and created more success than I'd ever created in my life. And then I thought, gosh, I really want to share this with people. And so I started the Supergenius brand, and now I teach people how to use very powerful super conscious meditations, visualizations, intuitive techniques, so that they can actually bring genius into their purpose, what it is that they love. So for example, my beautiful partner, she's a dancer, and she's bringing innovation and creativity into dance. You know, lots of my customers have brought it into property, business, startup business. One particular customer I'm just thinking of right now came along to my workshops and was going through a divorce. So he wanted to reconnect with a new purpose. And 4 years later, with originally no musical background, inability to play an instrument, and couldn't sing, he's launched three singles in the country music charts here in the UK, and all four of them got in the top 20. So this is about creativity and giving people access to their inner wisdom and intuition.
Absolutely love that. I remember a couple of years ago, you and I were sat at a mutual friends event that we're both speaking at, and we were talking about sort of business, and you're talking about Supergenius, and you said that one of your visions, I don't know if it's still the vision now, but one of your visions then was to have Supergenius become sort of the Harvard of personal development. So what is it that you mean by that in terms of enabling people to experience the equivalent of Harvard, being the Harvard of personal development?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that good memory, by the way. I think what's really important for me, and probably where I'm a little bit different, is, wrongly or rightly, I don't know. I'll find out in a few years' time, in hindsight, you know, with the benefit of hindsight. I'm very much a stickler for excellence. I think, for example, in the field of life coaching, I think it's great that people want to help other people. I think that's cool. But when you're doing something like life coaching, then I think it's really important you've got experience, and you can actually facilitate people through processes on a consistent basis. So for example, you know, you wouldn't go to a 3-day brain surgery workshop and then operate on someone on Monday. You'd have to have lots of years of experience. And when I got into personal development about 15 years ago, and I studied NLP, I went through a very rigorous course and testing process, of which I failed the first time. And I then had to go back and resubmit my work to get an NLP qualification. And what I found, and it's not a criticism, I'm just observing what's going on, is that there are some great organizations that teach NLP, for example, and then you can do like a Groupon course for like 2 hours and get a certification. So I was like, cool, you know what? If people come and train with me, I want that to be a standard of excellence. I want people to know that if they've done a Supergenius program or gone through a Supergenius journey, that this is a person who's not just learned something, but they've applied it and got results on a consistent basis. So that's where that concept came from. But yeah, good memory. Well done. That was 2 years ago. So
that was, yeah, a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So, and I actually love that. And I'm the same. I mean, it's really interesting. I want to sort of delve into your background a little bit, because I think what's always really interesting in these, whenever you, or in my experience today, any coach or speaker that is doing this kind of work, that they've never woke up and gone, this is what I want to be when I'm older. You know, they've ended up in this, normally as a result of some adversity, some things not working out. I know me personally, and sort of knowing your story already, which we'll share in a minute, hopefully. I grew up with a belief that money equaled happiness. I went on this tangent. I wanted to make loads of money. I made loads of money. Then I got myself in loads of debt. And then I had to deal with that whole challenge of working through that and all these inner conflicts and my whole world, or my reality, as I call it, which was completely like so far removed from where I thought life should be, and then having to do more and more and more and more inner work. So I'm obviously, your accent's a bit of a giveaway. You're from South Africa. I had a stint of living in South Africa myself some years ago, 10 years ago. So having spoken to you probably for the next hour or so, for the rest of the week, I'm going to be speaking with an Afrikaans accent now. But you guys will probably notice on the podcast, by the end of the podcast, I'll be sounding more and more South African. Do
you think I'll be able to get you to wear a Springbok rugby jersey by the end of the podcast?
I've got one upstairs. It's a possibility, you know, it's a possibility. So your transition, I know you touched on sort of you're in real estate, but what was that transition that enabled you to start going into personal development? And then what was the catalyst that made you realize, actually, I want to do this for a living, and I want to serve people and empower people to live their genius?
Yeah, thanks. So, you know, we've got very similar stories. I'm not surprised we're connected and, you know, speaking. My journey really, if I'm honest, started, and it's taken me a while to actually share the real start of my journey, because the real start of my journey used to give me a lot of shame, and I still feel a bit of it, a lot of embarrassment, and a lot of regret and pain. Yeah. So at the age of 19, my first girlfriend, proper girlfriend, she fell pregnant, and I became a dad at the age of 19. And then her dad said to me, you know what, you're going to be a miserable failure. You're just never going to amount to anything. I grew up in an area which, you know, most people don't even know about, because it's not an area that you talk about, if you know what I'm saying. And he said, you come from this area and you're just not going to amount to anything. And so I actually believed him. That's how little my self-esteem was. That's how low my confidence was. And yeah, I listened to what he said, and I left my daughter. Yeah, I gave up that responsibility because I believed that I was going to be a failure. And that pain almost killed me, to be blunt. And so I still always worked hard. Always had a strong work ethic, thanks to my grandparents. And I kind of worked my way up and eventually moved to England, because I installed, ironically, the first video over the internet solution in South Africa for a company called Vodacom. So now it's easy technology. We just jump on Zoom or something of that nature, and we do it. But 20 years ago, you needed to be a rocket scientist to get this technology working, right? So because of that little project that I created and got working, I think there was a bit of serendipity here, a bit of maybe synchronicity unintentionally created around my purpose, which is always a great philosophical topic to talk about. But I landed up in England mysteriously. And so that was cool. And I still had this pain in, you know, the sense of loss and unresolved purpose, which was fatherhood, and became very alcoholic, a lot of drugs, really was just self-medicating, and that became unsustainable for various reasons. And a dear friend of mine now, who I used to work with in my corporate career, who was the weirdo in the company because she had all these positive words on her desk and she had like a tree and this green water that she was drinking. And I was like, who's this crazy person, right? So that fascinated me. And now I'm one of those people. I've got my green water and the positive words. But to be blunt, she saved my life, and she took me to a seminar, and that was it. And then I was really hungry. I was desperate. I think now in hindsight, I didn't know where the desperation was coming from, but more recently I've realized that the desperation for me was about being a better person, so that in a way I can maybe just make up for, the biggest failure I've ever had in my life, which was letting my daughter down, I suppose. And a bit like you, I went and, did seminars, and I got into real estate, made some money, lost some money, made some money, lost some money. And then really found my place through super consciousness, and then decided to share that with people. So there you go. That's a short version, I hope.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Thank you for sharing. And the reason I always love asking these stories for those that are listening is because life's a journey, right? And so many people, thanks to Instagram and sort of the Instagram life, compare their chapter 20 to someone else, or their chapter 2 to someone else's chapter 20. And sort of similarly to yourself, I've had a massive amount of guilt and shame I've held on to for many years. I've had to learn to overcome and dissolve, and there's still stuff that I'm constantly working through. I call it like the onion process. You peel a layer of the onion, there's another layer of the onion there. You're just working through it. It's like a what's the word? Like a spiral. You keep going. You feel like you're making progress, but you are moving forward, like almost like a wormhole type thing. And I absolutely love that. You mentioned super conscious quite a few times. For people that aren't familiar with super conscious and sort of becoming super conscious, what is it?
Good question. It's becoming more trendy, and that's a good thing. I know Joe Dispenza talks about it quite a bit, and how I approach it is slightly different through a evolved version of meditation. So when we talk about super consciousness, when you raise your vibration and your consciousness and your frequency, because we're all energy, then you can actually access new messages, new inspiration. We've got another part to ourselves, which is equally important to master and learn to get over, which is your unconscious mind. Now, the way I look at it is, this is very Jungian, this philosophy, is that your unconscious mind is like a hard drive. It's stored all your past experiences, and it's got one objective, and that's to keep you safe. But now you and I, we want to be ambitious. We want to help people. We want to create wealth. We want to travel. We want to ride motorcycles and do unsafe things. And so we constantly have this internal battle between, oh, but remember the last time you did real estate, you got burned, so don't do it this time, versus, no, I want to be wealthy. And so super consciousness is firstly understanding what's holding me back, and then connecting to your, if I can be frank, your spirit, your higher self, and asking it through intuition, what is it that I would actually like to do that's going to fulfill my purpose, as opposed to what are my fears, doubts, and things of that nature, my emotions telling me to do. So, when I do trainings with people, I literally get them to close their eyes. I take them through a very unique process, and they will literally see in their mind's eye what it is they would love to create. So, for example, Danny and I went to Mexico in January, beautiful place. But in August, we did this little super conscious meditation together. And in my mind's eye, I got the word Mexico, and in her mind's eye, she got the word Mexico. We opened up our eyes, and then I said Mexico, and she said Mexico, and I was like, cool. And that's how we decided to go on holiday. So I do that process dozens of times throughout the day. For what's going on in our world right now, I have an events company. My only revenue source right now is events, and that's gone. Yeah. So it's easy to panic and get fearful, but I would just close my eyes, take myself through the process. And then I got to create a subscription coaching model and just test that out. And I saw the pricing, I saw what I was going to call it, I saw the copy, all in my mind's eye. And so that's what it means to be super conscious.
Love that. No, thank you very much for sharing. I know that there's a particular book that you're quite fond of that sort of was a catalyst in your in your journey. So I'd love you to share what the book is and what I suppose the wisdom is that you've extracted from the book that has really accelerated your journey.
Thanks. Yeah. So what I primarily teach is called Hermetic philosophy. And I got introduced to the Kybalion, so Kybalion. You can download a PDF version for free. Probably about 11 years ago. And when I read this, I was like, oh, mate, this is why my affirmations aren't working. This is why my vision board's not working. This is why I'm imagining what I want, but I seem to be attracting the opposite. I was very confused. I thought maybe I was broken and, I was destined to fail. And what the Kybalion does is it's kind of like the next level in all of that stuff. And what it fundamentally talks about are 7 key principles, 2 of which we're experiencing now at a very extreme version. One of them is that the pendulum is always swinging. Let me just try something here. Yeah. So the pendulum is always swinging. What I'm going to do is I've actually got it on my flip chart, and I'm going to plug you in. How's this for some creativity, man? And what that means is, I know you're very fond of John DeMartini. He talks about this a lot, yeah? So everything has a positive and negative. There's always 2 sides. John talks about this a lot. So, for example, people are always positive, but don't like to see the negative. Well, they'll attract the negative to balance themselves out. So John DeMartini talks about that. So you can't be positive without being negative. So the trick is, one of the things they teach in the Kybalion is you've got to see both positive and negative in any situation, but don't allow your emotions to be influenced by those forces. In other words, you're going to be present, right? So that's the one rule. The other rule is everything that goes up must come down. So, I had a really very successful period of business over the last 6 years, more than I could ever dreamed, if I'm honest. But I knew that was going to come to an end. Now, I'm not going to say that I predicted a virus. I mean, that would be foolish and a little silly. But I knew something was going to happen to make the trend go down. I had no idea it was going to be this severe. It's a bit like a roller coaster where you're going up, and then when you drop, you're freaking out, right? So in a way, what was beautiful about Hermetic philosophy was I was mentally and emotionally prepared for the dip. And in a way, I was also prepared in my business for the dip because I knew it was coming. I just didn't know when or how. So there's some cool principles that will explain to you, in my opinion, about how the world works. Everything ebbs and flows. The tide goes in, the tide comes out. Relationships go up, relationships go down. So when people don't know how these laws of the universe work, when it goes down, people are thinking that this is the end. Well, it's not the end. It's just the start of a new upcycle, if that makes sense. So then your strategy's got to change. What you do on a daily basis change. So it's a bit like most people are playing the game of life without knowing the rules. And I think the Kybalion really explains the rules of life very powerfully.
And just to be clear, like the 7 rules you're alluding to, they're effectively universal laws, right? That's the basis of them. And I think that you hit the nail on the head. So many people have got caught up with this way of life, like this positive thinking. You've got to be positive all the time, and that in itself becomes very damaging because then they beat themselves up when things aren't going the way that they want them to. And I know that you also talk about sort of a pendulum, right, of the pendulum and how you can sort of rise above. So if you'd be willing to just share I know I've seen you do it at events.
I've actually got the diagram ready, so let me bring that to you. So here we go. We're pushing technology to the limits, everybody. If you just give me a second, I will show you the pendulum quickly. So get that up there. Okay, cool. I used to be an electrical engineer, mate. So, okay, cool.
Oh, look at that.
Can you see that?
I can see that. But for the people that are listening to this on the podcast, I'm going to describe it. So,
yeah, cool.
The way
imagine Total Wipeout. You know the game Total Wipeout? So you've got these balls that swing from left to right, and you've got to dodge them, right? There's normally about 5 in a row that you've got to dodge. Well, the pendulum of positivity and negativity is swinging all the time. Markets go up, markets go down. So the problem is that most people are impacted by downward markets, upward markets, mentally, emotionally. Like, how many people commit suicide when the economy crashes, okay? So what they're not realizing is that the economy is always going to crash at some point. So then don't freak out about it. Just prepare for it. Relationships are always going to recreate and then die, recreate, die. We live in a world where, you know, everything that starts finishes. You know, we got, isn't it Easter coming up as well? How interesting is that, right? So Easter is a representation of resurrection. Every film you watch, someone dies and then they resurrect into a new form of love or purpose. So the trick here, if you read the Kybalion, is that you want to be at the top of this pendulum, watching the swing, not being on the swing. Can you imagine being on a massive swinging ball? You know, you're going to have to hold on for dear life. You're going to get freaked out. But if you're at the top of the pendulum, looking down, right, which is why another premise in the Kybalion is you got to use the higher perspective over the lower perspective, right? When you can look at it downwards, you'll see that actually this is just nature clearing out the old and making space for the new. So that's a really powerful premise. Check it out in the Kybalion. So hopefully that worked for you there, Will.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I think it's so true. And the thing that I love of that whole piece is that, again, for the people that are listening to this and they're not watching it on YouTube, is that you imagine that pendulum swinging, and like you say, like the big, I don't know what is the name of them, that when they have the big ball, they go and they smash into buildings to knock them down. I don't know what.
I was just trying to think of that myself now.
Is
wrecking ball. Wrecking
ball. That's the one. Like the song. Who was the? Was it?
Don't do it. Don't go down that road. Don't sing it, man. If you're going to get me into pop singing, then your subscribers are going to unsubscribe, man, because I love singing, but I wasn't born to sing. Let's just leave it there.
But from what I've been seeing, you were born to dance. I've been seeing with your partner, and you've got quite the skill there. I mean, if this doesn't work out, then you've got a whole new career there waiting for you. 100%.
I'll tell you what. Then it's going to get spiritual.
So if you imagine the wrecking ball, like the wrecking ball in itself, obviously at the bottom of the pendulum swinging, but the part of the top doesn't move, you know, that's stable, that's poised, that's present, and that's effectively what you mean. You bring your higher self up, you take that higher perspective, you gain bigger perspective, and then you don't have to get caught up in the emotions and the chaos of what's going on. So absolutely.
Okay. So just to give you one tip there, so that everyone can take away from your podcast, what they can do is, if you're feeling emotional, right, it's completely normal. That's just the internal wrecking ball swinging in your consciousness, but don't take action in that space. You know, if you're feeling really angry because you've been wronged, or you're feeling really sad or depressed because of loss, as an example, or you're feeling afraid because you're uncertain of the future, just notice and go, oh man, I'm absolutely bricking it right now because I don't know where my business is going to be. But then you don't want to make decisions and take actions from fear. You want to kind of rise above it. And if I can maybe just, you know, be a little altruistic here, say you really want to embody a vibration of love. Like, what would you love in that situation? See? And so if the highest form of consciousness is love. And so if you can focus on what you love and helping people do what they love, then that's, if I may give people a little tip here to take away from the podcast, those are two very powerful questions you can ask yourself. And the more you ask yourself those two questions, the less the wrecking ball of your emotions will have an impact over you. So, you know, you've seen me speak. Often I actually get up on stage, particularly if it's an environment I'm not familiar with, I'll feel super anxious, you know, particularly when people expect you to do well. When you're not really known, then you can kind of go on stage and be yourself and people have no expectations. Then you start to get a little bit known and people are like, oh yeah, I flew all the way from here to come and see you. And it's like, oh, wish I didn't know that. So your wrecking ball is always active, you see. But when I go on stage for speaking, for example, the first couple of minutes, I'm probably anxious as hell. Like I was about to ask the first girlfriend out, you know, at the age of 14 or something. But I'm focusing on doing what I love, which is to impact the audience. And then what I find is the emotions sometimes disappear immediately. And sometimes they take a bit longer, maybe hours or even days, depending on what the situation is in your life. So just a tip for people to take away from this podcast.
No, I love that. Thank you. So just to reiterate, the two questions are:
what would I love? And what can I do to help people get what they love?
Love that. Absolutely love
It's
that.
really simple. Like, with what's going on right now, because I can't run events, I'm like, well, what do I love, right? And what I love, and you know this about me, is I love motorcycles. I love exercising. I love going out for walks, particularly when the sun is out. It's not just about work, you see. That's where people get it wrong. They think their purpose is only work related. I love my partner. I love to be silly. She's got a thriving TikTok channel. So I love to go on her TikTok channel and just be silly and entertain kids. And then when it comes to work, I love helping people create their purpose. So then I focus on that. Last week, I ran a 5-day workshop because I couldn't run the event on Zoom, from 9 till 5. And it was actually pretty cool. But the reason I say that is I was focused on my purpose, serving people. And I think that really helped me get over possible anxiety around my whole business just grinding to a halt. Does that make sense? If I just sat here by myself, not trying to serve people to do what they love, I think I would have actually struggled with the pendulum a lot more than I did. So service and seeing how you can serve people to get what they want, which is what Zig Ziglar spoke about. If you want to get what you want, just help a lot of people get what they want. Those are critical because it gets you out of yourself. Anyway, but hope that.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, I did a TEDx talk a couple of years ago, and the title of the TEDx talk was exactly that. It's not about you, and talking about this philosophy of living your life to empower others and to impact others, sort of living as a servant leader, if you like, as to use the terminology and a few other people use. You mentioned purpose, and I know that growing up you were obsessed with purpose and finding your purpose. And so I've got a couple of questions. First of all, what do you define a purpose to be?
So this is a big mystery for me. Every book I read was related to purpose. And my assumption was that we had one purpose and you have to find what it is and then, everything will be fine. But that's not actually my experience. So I've kind of developed my own philosophy for myself. I don't know if it's, benefits other people. I know it has benefited quite a few people that I've worked with. But I've come to think of my purpose more like a garden that I can plant whatever I want into that garden. I can pull it out and plant something else in next year as well. And the reason I kind of think of my purpose as something that's quite dynamic, in other words, it's changing all the time, and I can try new things out all the time, is it took away the stress of needing to find the answer. So what I found is that, purpose is not just about, for me, work. I've got purpose about contributing to a beautiful safe house in South Africa. So contribution, philanthropic work. One of my purposes is riding my motorcycle. That gives me joy. Another purpose of mine is, exercise. That gives me vitality. So when you've got lots of strings in the bow of your purpose, it actually makes the whole thing very energizing. It helps the other aspects of your purpose. So for example, if you're only focused on your work as your purpose, well, work's not always fun, is it? Sometimes you got to do things that you don't enjoy. So if you didn't get joy from work today, knowing that you've got something to look forward to, like a track day, or, oh my gosh, I need to pay the rent every month for the safe house, or they go homeless. Then what that does is it gives you multiple forms of inspiration, as opposed to just you relying on, a financial goal of financial independence, which didn't work for me. I found that there was no accountability there. So a couple of key things that I've mentioned there. One is explore what your purpose is in every area of life: relationships, fun, travel and adventure, vitality and longevity or health, wealth. Really explore what it is that you love in all of those areas, number one. And then number two, find out how you can make commitments to those, because when we make commitments to different areas of our life, like a direct debit to homeless people, which is something I have, then when you feel like giving up, which is probably 80% of the time in my experience, then you wake up in the morning and you go, oh, mate, it's raining. Oh, I don't want to do another event. And it's like, oh, but I have to, because I've got a direct debit going out for homeless people. Or like now, oh, my whole business is stopped. Oh, well, I'll just take 3 months off. But I actually can't, because I've got things coming out that I'm paying for, that I'm responsible for, that inspire me to get to become a more powerful person than I even think I am. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
So I think, looking at it as a garden where you incrementally improve it, you're constantly asking yourself, what else would I love? So if I look at my motorcycling, for example, I started off with that 899 Ducati. It was, it's an entry-level Ducati. And now I've got one of the fastest ones. But then I've also got a van, and then I've got all the equipment and the kit that goes with it. And I've got all the tools. And, you want to keep nurturing what you love so that it grows. And then you become more accountable to that. And then you grow because you have to pay for the thing. So I don't know if that makes sense. I'm trying to keep it simple. This, bear in mind, I talk about this stuff for like 4 days. So I'm trying to simplify 4 days of what I teach into, a succinct answer. So I hope that was clear.
Yeah, no, it's really clear. Thank you very much. And for people that are, that are, and I'm sure many people that are like it. I don't know my purpose, but I've got to find it. I've got to find it. What's your advice to those people?
Yeah, great question, right? Literally, I'm going to go back to our previous conversation, and that is just ask yourself a question: what would I love, right? Not what do I need to do? What are people telling me to do? What are my family expecting to do? What would I love? Now, this is going to be really funny for you, but you'll see why this was significant. So when I heard this question for the first time, I was like, mate, what I would love is to have a relationship with my daughter. And this is 11 years ago, yeah? It was the first time I actually said that that's what I want. When I heard that question, when I heard that in a seminar, someone said, life is just about going for what you want. And then I sat back and I was like, wow, I want to be a dad, yeah, to my daughter. But then I became quite chronic around realizing I didn't know what I wanted. And I was a bit frustrated and a bit stressed. So then I was like, okay, let's start small. So the first morning I woke up with this question in my mind and I kind of meditated on it. I was like, the answer I got was tea and scones, right? I was like, well, that's not a very ambitious vision there, mate. But why that was significant was for the 3 years leading up to that, I was in major debt. I failed on some investments. I lost a lot of money, other people's money. And I was kind of punishing myself for 3 years. I hadn't bought a chocolate, a bag of crisps, or a fizzy drink for 3 years because I didn't feel like I deserved it, having lost everyone's money. And I felt I could only give myself what I love when I paid everyone back, right? So to then wake up and go, I'm going to give myself tea and scones was a huge pivotal moment for me. I remember going to the little family-run tea shop, which is a beautiful tea shop in Palmer's Green. And I'd had that tea and scones, and I felt so guilty and so ashamed. But you see, the key thing that I was starting to recondition my mind to was that I can have what I want without compromise, regardless of my past. And so the more I asked myself every morning, what would I love? I became a little more ambitious. And because I started giving myself what I loved, guess what? I started becoming happier. My depression went. I became a bit more courageous with my business ventures. I was actually a nice person to be around. I wasn't upset and angry and resentful about my past. And because I started to be a nice person, people started to want to do business with me. So like a garden, it was growing. Flowers were blossoming. Bees were coming in and pollinating it. And I was creating kind of like an ecosystem of opportunity and vibration and vitality of love, yeah? And very soon after that, I made a lot of money, paid all the debts off, and now here we are. So for people who are curious about their purpose, simply wake up in the morning and ask yourself, what would I love? And don't try and get, the sum total of your entire life in one meditation. It doesn't work like that. In the same way with a garden, you plant a seed, you water it, you have to be patient. What too many people are doing in personal development is they're planting a seed, chucking 20 liters of water at it, like massive action, dumping 20 liters of water on a seed, and the seed's like died. And then they go, see, it doesn't work. So these things take time. It takes time to nurture, evolve your spirit. It takes time to nurture, evolve your purpose. And then when it's got strong roots, like a big tree's got strong roots, no pendulum is going to sway that tree. It'll be able to weather any storm, but it takes time. So there you go. A philosophical answer, but also some practical advice, hopefully, for people listening.
No, and I love that. And I think as well, really, really relatable, you know, like I say, I think that certainly my perception when I first got into this world and I call it my lightning moment, which was back in 2013. Like it was like a thing out of a film where it felt like the sky opened up and the heavens come down, and I stood there crying my eyes out for about 15 minutes, like a real breakthrough moment. I've only had a few of those in my life, and literally two. And this perception that I had of people that worked in this space as the gurus, I hate the term, but the people that you might look up to and be learning from, is that they were like born perfect, and that there was nothing wrong with them, and like they basically popped out and just sort of strolled, like put a suit on it, 4 minutes old, and just started strolling down the road and whatever. And I think it's so powerful for people to hear that. But yeah, where you're at now versus where you were, that moment back then of you giving yourself tea and scones was a massive win for you. It was a massive win that was the catalyst that started boosting your deserve level. And you and I both know that the deserve level is one of the biggest things that stop people from attracting what it is that they want into their life, because they don't feel they deserve it because of past actions. But the other beauty, and I know I'm hoping we're going to have time to touch on it, is talking about alchemy and how when you are perceiving one thing, i.e. the stuff that you did in the past that you had all the guilt and the shame around, that actually at the same time that was perfect, but there was just another whole side of the pendulum, if you like, that you hadn't seen, right? So I think that's so powerful for people to be able to see. So alchemy is something, so I know, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but Supergenius, sort of the main three pillars of it is sort of super consciousness, sort of beginning structurally creative, and the alchemy piece as well. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, perfect. Geez, man, do you want to come and run my workshops? I'd like to take you all. That's perfect, dude. Well done.
So alchemy, for people that aren't familiar with alchemy, maybe they've heard of the term turning lead into gold, which is a great metaphor for essentially what we're doing. What is alchemy, and how do we apply it from a personal development context?
Yeah, amazing. So well done for picking up on this. I'm really impressed. So you've done some great research, and it's going to really benefit your audience. So thanks for doing that. So alchemy, just metaphorically, is turning lead to gold, which is what you've mentioned. So what that means literally, and my gosh, this is like the one thing that people comment on when they come to my workshops, particularly people who've done lots of training before. They've gone, gee whiz, this is the thing that's missing in my life, is the ability to take any form of tension and turn it into inspiration, intuition, and imagination. So imagine, right, being very emotional, or having negative emotions, or being stressed, or having any form of tension. And then remembering that energy cannot be created or destroyed, taking that energy, and instead of getting rid of it, maybe through exercise, which isn't a bad thing, but meditating, or some dysfunctional stuff, like I used to drink and drugs and all that rest of it that goes with that. Instead of getting rid of that tension, what if we harness that tension, that energy, as a form of creativity to energize us, to motivate us, to then push ourselves to a new level? So, you know, if you think of J.K. Rowling, what a beautiful story, right? So she was in a tremendous amount of pain after her divorce. You can listen to her story on YouTube. And she turned that pain into a book, which has done very well for herself. So what most people do, and I think there is a time and a place for therapy and healing and all of that's really important. But when you want to create what you want, emotions aren't such a bad thing, actually, particularly negative emotions. In fact, it was Napoleon Hill who, in his book, Think and Grow Rich, wrote that the number one reason people fail is they have an inability to deal with their negative emotions. So we look at performing artists. We look at what's happened with Caroline Flack recently, which is tragic. We aren't, as human beings, taught to master our emotions. In fact, our emotions master us. And Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it directs your life and you will call it fate. But what he's saying there is that all our past experiences are creating emotional reactions, fear, and then we think that fear is real. we think the danger is real and then we act on it. But what alchemy does is alchemy transforms all forms of tension into love, into creativity, into purpose, into fulfillment, into wealth. I've written some of my best Facebook ads when I was really pissed off after a Liverpool game because they probably lost or something. Does that make sense? I know that sounds silly, but in the past I would have drank, Liverpool, rubbish, all that kind of stuff. And I use that as a silly example, but my point is, emotions are inspiration for creativity, but we don't use them for that reason. So alchemy is the transformation of all forms of tension into creativity.
Love that. And if you were to have a tip of how you go about doing that, it's like you say, those Facebook ads where you were really pissed and you're like, and you had that energy, and you obviously transmuted the energy, if you like, into something that was more effective, let's say. Any tips for that, or a tip for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. And so what I would recommend is you grab a piece of paper and a pen and you ask yourself the following questions. Number one, what am I thinking? Right? So maybe you've had a bust up with your partner, maybe a big client has stopped paying and you're like, gosh, I'm vulnerable here financially. Anything, like we're human beings. Even I react and get emotional. It's completely normal, particularly as you play a bigger game, by the way. You've got more inputs of possible stress coming your way. You've got staff and VAT and financial management and a whole bunch of stuff, right? So when you are in a moment of stress, particularly, you can ask yourself the following questions. What am I thinking? So I literally get a piece of paper out and I'll write down, what am I thinking? Oh, I'm going to fail. This is never going to work. I knew this is too good to be true. You literally write all your thoughts out. Get them out. It's like you're doing an assessment, basically. The second question you can ask yourself is, what am I feeling? I feel like a failure. I feel embarrassed. I said something on stage that offended someone because, when you're a speaker, people think you're perfect. That's why I laughed at your comment. People don't allow you the freedom to make mistakes on stage. If you could put a microphone on your face and you say something that's offensive by accident, people hold that against you, So often I get up on stage and I say something and I'm a bit, a bit of a crazy character. I like to have fun. And sometimes I cross the line, right? And then I feel embarrassed because I've had someone criticize me. So then I'll go, I feel like a failure. I feel not good enough. Particularly if I go speak at events and there are more successful people than me on stage. I might go, gosh, who am I to actually be on this stage? I'm nobody. These are like weeds in the garden of your subconscious mind. You want to get them out, right? So any process of gardening starts with get the weeds out first, create the space to planting what you want. So what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And then what am I assuming? This is important. So I'm assuming that this person's going to write a bad review on my Facebook. I'm assuming that review is going to ruin my entire business, forgetting about the 300 positive reviews I've had. Mm-hmm. So by simply acknowledging what you're thinking, feeling, and assuming, you're going to make a tremendous step towards creating what you want in alchemy. And then the last question is, what would I love? That's how I feel. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm assuming. But actually, what would I love? Well, I'd love to go back on stage, learn from my mistake, try again, and keep doing what I'm doing. Keep doing what I'm doing because I enjoy it. 4-step process.
Absolutely love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. So just before we round up, 3 quick fire questions. First one in no particular order. What did you want to be when you were a kid?
A fireman, because my dad was a fireman.
So did I. Have I got it here? There's a photo of me. Let me show you this. Those of you that are watching the podcast or listening to the podcast, you're gonna have to go on YouTube to see this. I don't know if you can see that picture there.
Oh wow, dude, that's amazing.
I must be 3 years old there, dressed as Fireman Sam with my red little wellies that I lived in. So how's that for a little bit of synchronicity?
That's beautiful.
If you want to label it as just something like that. Second question is, who do you look up to now? Who's a personal hero of yours that you look up to as a role model?
Wow, that's a great question. I have to give you an honest answer and say that this is going to sound contrived, but I genuinely, this is how I think. I don't actually look up to anyone. but I do pay attention to what I can learn from everyone. So even if I go to the supermarket, I try, and my big fear is that I lose humility to learn from people, even people who are not teachers, if that makes sense. My dad's a great teacher. He's don't take this the wrong way, but he's the most evil person I've ever met. Very abusive, very violent. He's in a care home right now from extreme dementia, from alcoholism. He's been there for 11 years. When I stopped hating him, he was one of my greatest teachers, because if it wasn't for his behavior, I probably wouldn't be who I am today. So he's not the father I wanted, but he's the father I got. And then I can learn from every experience. I think I'm addicted to learning. I think I should start learning anonymous. And so I like to look for the lesson in every experience. I'm a bit obsessive like that. If I watch sports, I like to learn from Jurgen Klopp. I like to learn from Pep Guardiola. I like to learn from Jose Mourinho. So I really try and pay attention, not because I'm not being present, but I actually think, if you don't mind me saying, as part of my genius, is that as an educator, I'm always loving being educated. I'm watching the news right now and I'm going, well, what can I learn from this? I love, seeing your comments and podcasts and stuff. What can I learn from you? So I don't necessarily have one particular person, but I do try and learn from the best. So even in my motorcycling, I've got the best available motorcycling coach, and I spend time with them and I get results. So hope that's decent answer for your quick one.
I love that answer. And one last thing, if you could go back to your 10-year-old self and tell yourself one thing that would serve you for future life, what would that one message be?
Wow, good question. Genuinely, I would say to my 10-year-old self that you can make your dreams come true, and so you can be whatever you want. Because I only learned that in my 30s. Yeah. And I would have made different decisions. I would have really gone for things that I probably gave up on too soon, right before I was about to get the dream. So that's what I would say.
Thank you so much for sharing. So Ryan, thank you. This has been fantastic. I've really, really enjoyed it. For people that want to find out more about you and that I love this guy, I think he's brilliant, where can they find you?
Yeah, just go online, look up Ryan Pinnick. Not the rock star in the US. There's two of us. So you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook. I've got a whole bunch of online stuff going on right now, and just get in touch and connect and interact. I'd love to hear from people. And what I'll do in the episode notes, I'll put a link, if it's okay with you, to Supergenius website, cool. Supergenius Life, or I can't remember exactly what the website is, but I'll find it. I'll put it in the notes. So if people want to find out, you can just head to the episode notes and you can find out about that. Thanks, mate. I really appreciate it. You're a legend. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much. I'm very grateful. Absolute pleasure. So guys, thanks for listening. Tune into our next episode coming up very soon. Until next time, make it happen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Make It Happen with Will Polston podcast. Make sure you join Will's free Facebook group, the Make It Happen community. Please support the show by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Share this episode with at least one friend you think would benefit from it, and give Will a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. Until next time, make it happen.